My name is Adil Najam, and I have the great honor and privilege to be one of the two co-lead authors of this report. My colleague, Dr. Faisal Bari, unfortunately, could not be here today because he is not well and could not travel from Lahore, but sends his greetings too. It is truly a pleasure to be here. It is always a pleasure to be back in Pakistan and Islam, but it is a special pleasure to be launching this report. For the last year, anytime anyone sees me, the first thing they ask is, "Ke kabari?" And my response has been, "Ke chal padiye." So it is on its way. But it really is a pleasure, and as Shakil Saab mentioned, the story of the Pakistan National Human Development Report is really the story of a journey, and I would confess that it's one of the most interesting journeys that I have had the honor to be part of in my career. I'll take the next few minutes not to go through the whole report because there's a lot of very rich material there, but maybe try to whet your appetite enough that you will, in fact, open the report and try to read through it. There's a lot of hard work that's gone into it. Most of it is not mine, but of the wonderful young team that worked on it. But there is a huge number of ideas, and the success of the report is really how people take those ideas. And one of the things that I hope you have picked up is this pack of cards. And I would ask you to essentially, just pick out one and see what it says. And what the pack of cards is that instead of coming up with these old people coming up with ideas on what we should do, one of the things we did over the last 3 years is ask a lot of young people what they think should be done. And what the pack of cards has is the 101 of those ideas. 101 ki salami jo hoti hai. So it's a good number, but we chose 101, and some of them might sound silly. Many of them are very profound, but each one of them represents the type of thinking that young people have in what can be done. In fact, to whet your appetite, and before I get into the more formal findings, let me share one of those. One of those cards you will see, for example, suggests, I believe this one was from Quetta, a young lady in one of the focus groups in Quetta who suggested that the Prime Minister and the Chief Ministers of each province should be constitutionally mandated to go to a school at least once a month to read to young people. So I say that because there are lots of these ideas which in some ways sound simple, in other ways I think capture the profundity of what our young people are thinking. I want to start by raising the 3 questions that propelled this process about 3 and some years ago when Marc-Andre and I were having lunch together and this idea sprang up. And the first of those that really is the driving question for us is, what does it mean to be young in Pakistan today? You noticed my orange shirt. If you were sitting here before in one of the videos, I've been wearing bright colored shirts trying to bring my youth back, which doesn't work just with the colors. But talking to a lot of young people does. So our first and motivating question, if the report can do anything, is if it gives you a snapshot of what it means, good, bad, beautiful, profound, ugly, each part of it, of what it means to be young in Pakistan today. The second question that propelled us, and a lot of the report really looks at this, is we are not at the very beginning, but still the beginning of a demographic transition of a youth bulge. Is this youth bulge going to be a boom, or is it going to be a bust? You'll hear these numbers again. You've already heard this before. 64% of Pakistanis, 64% of Pakistanis are 30 or under. Let that fact sink in. Let that fact sink in. If you are over 30, you are not the center of Pakistan. If you are over 30, you are not even near the center of Pakistan. Of those, the 15 to 29% is what we are calling youth. And what that means, as you've heard, is not only are we a young country today, we are going to remain a young country at least up to 2040, probably around 2045. That means, for example, if you're interested in politics, every election, not one, not two, every election between now and then is going to be decided by the young. If you think of the young as a constituency, if you think of the young as a group of identity, then the youth of Pakistan are bigger than the largest province of Pakistan. Right? So that is in some ways both the opportunity and the challenge. The challenge of the boom or the bust is every country around us in our neighborhood that has in fact taken the economic leap has taken it partly on the back of a youth bulge. Whether it is Malaysia, whether it is India right now, whether it is even, I would argue, China, certainly other countries, youth, Turkey is another one, so youth becomes a major driver of that economic moment. But the bust is also around us. When the voices of the young are not heard, when the frustrations of the young boil over, then you see anger, then you see angst. And in some ways, we see both of these, the entrepreneurial spirit and the anger of the young, very apparent on your front pages of the newspaper everywhere around you. The challenge for you, not just for UNDP and the World Bank and the international agencies, certainly for the government, but for each one of us personally, is whether this direction is going to be one of boom, which is going to come, we believe, by listening to the young, or of bust, which is going to be the direction of lecturing them and telling them what they should do. The third question that we've been motivated, and you see all over the report, what will decide the future of those who will decide our future? And what I mean by that is it's very clear to me, very, very clear to me in this process, the future of Pakistan, good or bad, will be decided by those who are today between 15 and 29. The question is what will define their future. And the answer to that, partly in this pack, but also in the other more formal recommendations, is the conditions we provide to the young today to capture that energy, and to capture the energy in positive entrepreneurial ways rather than dissipate that energy in anger and frustration. So one of the things that you'll see in the report, this sort of demographic graph, and I won't go into the details, this is not the time, but you have all the details there. But as I said, the point is we are young today. We're going to be young for a fairly long time. And by the way, if the UNDP is still in the business of NHDRs by that time, come 2040, you should be doing a report on aging. No, because that's the demographic reality. Like everywhere else in the world, this rela of young people will go and it will pass, and then they will become like us. And if you have not invested today, then you will have another problem. So that, to me, is the big challenge. As you have heard, the key task here was producing the National Human Development Report, but the key goal really was to initiate a conversation, to elevate an issue, and it is really actually quite wonderful to see the young people being talked about in many ways by many people, and I think that's the conversation we have tried to be part of and to contribute to. Now, very briefly, if you look at the report, you'll find that one of the things we found early on, and we have structured our report in thinking about what it means to be young in Pakistan, we've structured it around what we call the 3 E's. So our framework is that if you're going to empower the young people of the country, there are 3 essential levers more important than all others, related. 3 essential levers that will shift one way or the other. The 3 E's for us are education, employment, and empowerment. And one of the things that is spread through the report is that you cannot, in fact, work on them one at a time. You have to do it all 3. So the first one is education, but not just education, quality education, me'ari talim. The challenge is not just putting kids in school, you'll hear about that, but giving them good education. I have spent my whole life as a teacher. That's the only thing I know how to do is to pontificate. I was 4 years old and my parents left me in school and no one has come to pick me up. So I just keep going from one school to the other, in one role and the other. This is a passion for me. This is not just a profession, but here is the problem. And if I can speak in Urdu, one of the realizations is, masla ye nahi hai ki agar aapke paas degree ho to aapko naukri nahi milti. Masla ye hai ki aapke paas degree ho to ye pakka nahi pata ki aapke paas taaleem hai ki nahi hai. That it is not just the question of whether I'm sorry I didn't translate that, but that education has to give you quality. That's what the employer is saying, and so on and so forth. You'll hear about that. So the first one is education, but not just education, me'ari talim. The second one is employment. And again, it's the same story. Not just employment, but gainful employment, and what we call ba-maqsad rozgar. And by ba-maqsad rozgar, what we mean is, in fact, Pakistan has done fairly well in creating jobs. In fact, if you look at the numbers, Pakistan has done fairly well in creating jobs. We have mostly created bad jobs. And by bad jobs, we mean jobs that are casual, that do not give you security of work, that do not have safe working conditions, that do not have reliable tenure, where you are not sure whether you're going to keep that job, you're at the whim of people. And what you need to do, and you'll hear more about this, is to create jobs that have dignity. And the third of our E's, as I said, is engagement, but here again, hakiki shamuliyat. And that means meaningful engagement. What do we mean by engagement? And this is actually the longest and, in my view, one of the most important chapters in the report. We took at every district, and I would like to thank Marvi Maiman, who pushed us to make sure that FATA was included, to make sure that GB was included, to make sure that AJK was included. All of them are included. For each district, we have determined the human development. And as Neil rightly pointed out, if you are in Islamabad, you're living in a place somewhat close to Spain. And if you are in remote parts of any of the provinces, you are living about as low as anywhere in the world. Right? The opportunity for policy here is that human development actually can be moved quite easily. Not quite easily, but relatively easily. What do you do to improve your district's human development? Schools, hospitals, libraries, parks. Right? Those are things that are also politically desirable, and that, I think, was the magic of Dr. Mehboob ul Haq, that if you can move the conversation to human development, you in fact also politically move it to a place. So we produced the National Human Development Index for every district, and then, as I said, went back and we've done it at 2-year intervals, and with a formula that we spent a lot of time thinking about the concept. We also produced a Youth Development Index. Because the report is on youth, we produced a Youth Development Index. We didn't have data at the district level, so we created sub-regions. Each province has 2 or 3 sub-regions. And so it is less granular, but we hope over time this will become. Now again, if you see the reds and the greens, it in some ways shows you the image of the country that you have in your mind, but I hope it shows you the image that needs and can be improved. Also produced in the report, and we are very, very proud of this because this is again work done here in Pakistan for this report, is not just a Youth Development Index, but a gender-corrected Youth Development Index. And if you look at those 2 maps, you see some of the things change. So the first map says, if you are young, what is the opportunity available to you? And the second map at the bottom says, if you are young, what is the gender difference of the opportunity available to you? I won't go into the math, but actually if it's bad for both men and women, it will actually be green. Right? Because it's the difference between the opportunity, not the relative. But the point is, there's a lot of serious, boring number crunching here that our team has done, and I hope you will take the time to look at it. Let me, as I begin towards the wrap up, let me present to you what we found about what it means to be young in Pakistan. Our best artifact is the one that's on the cover. Neil is an old hand at human development reports, and he reminded me that we took the graphic heritage very seriously. We did. And this was also Dr. Mehboob Haq's heritage. So this colorful youth wheel, in many ways, is one of our proudest babies. And here is what we did. So we said, okay, there are about 60 million young people by our definition. So talking about 60 million is difficult. To explain it easily to people, imagine that we can condense all 60 million statistically into 100 young people. 100 young people in this room, if we could get them to be totally, thoroughly, exactly, statistically representative of all of Pakistan's young people, what would the 100 look like? And that is our youth wheel. All of Pakistan's young represented is 100 people. There are a lot of interesting things we find in there. Some are fairly obvious. The provincial distribution, for example, even though it would sometimes remind people of how unequal in size, population size, the different regions are. But when you get to the more nuance of the question of what it means to be young, there are a number of interesting, sometimes disturbing facts. Let me share a few with you. If you had 100 young Pakistanis, totally representative of all of Pakistan, only six out of the 100 would have access to a library. That doesn't mean they use the library. That just means that if they were to use the library, they had a library. Out of 100, only seven would have access to any form of a sports field, a sports facility where they can play football or cricket or whatever. Out of the 100, only 3, 2 point something, 2 or 3, choose your number. I'll choose the bigger one. Only 3 would ever in their life have gone to a cinema. Out of the 100, only 3 would ever in their life have heard live music. This is why we have live music here after my speech. The point of this, 15 out of the 100 will have access to the internet. About 50 some would have a mobile phone. So there are also good things. I'll come to those. Only 1 out of the 100 would have a car. Although car would be one of the biggest aspirations of this group, and it's a separate question. Only 1 would have a car, 12 would have a motorcycle, 10 would have a bicycle. When I was young, probably that number would have been higher, the bicycle number. But more importantly, about 70 of them would have no means of personal mobility. Mobility is freedom. Why am I presenting this? Because in some ways, the space to be young is restricted. Think of what you want people in 15 to 29 to be doing. You want them to be young, you want them to be playing, you want them to be doing sometimes things you don't want them to be doing. It is unfair on the young to put the grave matters of national politics or international politics on their head as if they have to all constantly think about what is happening in the world around them and what political system it is going to be and how that is going to happen. The space to be young is restricted, and I want to highlight particularly that if you are a female in those 100, the space to be young is even more restricted. Right? So only 22 of the 100 will have access to a park. In some ways, this is a very solvable problem. In another way, it is a very profound idea. Just give young people the space to be young. Other numbers, again, please go and explore this graph. Every time I look at it, this picture, I learn other things. It is a very positive group of young people. So of these young people, 67, this was one of my favorite numbers, 67 out of the 100 will believe that their life is and will be better than their parents. This to me was a pretty profound numbers. I thought about it and then I said, well, that's about right. Everyone I can think of in my own cohort, in fact, did do better than our parents. But part of the learning here is it's not just that they empirically think their life is better than their parents, they demand that their lives should be better than their parents. That's the policy message. 80 out of the 100 would say they are happy. 70 out of the 100 would feel that they are safe. That 30 don't is something that we should be thinking about. So this provides a complex but also nuanced picture of what it means to be young. It provides both the boom picture and the bust picture. It says there is a lot to build up the entrepreneurial energy in this hope that they want to be better, they think they can be better. And there is a lot to be concerned about in the shrinking space to be young, and that can be provided from a policy perspective. Very briefly, as I said, we had the 3 E's, so let me go through at least one major finding of the 3 E's. There are many, many things. I won't go through all of them. I just wanted to give you a flavor of the type of things that we were doing. The first of those, of course, is talim, education. And I see my friend Musharraf and many other colleagues from Alif Alan, and I want to especially give a call out to them for the wonderful work they have done that we were able to build on this and other things, and by many other institutions, but including that. So one of the things that we did on education, as I said, the focus is on quality, but this point is on quantity. We all keep hearing about the number of kids who are out of school. So we know that number. We tried to put that number slightly on its head. And I went to my team and I said, okay, we have this constitutional provision, 25A. I wish we talk a lot about constitution in this country. I wish we talked more about 25A. 25A is the provision that says every young child of school-going age is going to be provided the opportunity to be in school. Now, we know that provision is not being met. We know a large number of children are out of school. So what we said is, I asked them, go and calculate for me if we keep putting kids in school at the rate we are doing now, which is about 1% enrollment growth per year, which is actually quite high. 1% additional is not a low number, right? So that's a high number. We've been doing very well. If we keep doing that well, how long will it be before every child of school-going age is in school, right? When will we meet the provision of 25A? They came back to me with what we call the onion diagram, and they say, well, 2076. Breathe that number in. 2076 is the year by which every child of school-going age, if we keep doing what we're doing, will be in school. Now, we are counting not just the kids who are there, but the kids who are coming, right? So we are putting in the demographic rela that I'm talking about. I said to them, yaar, this is not going to work. I want a number in my lifetime. My life goal is, before I die, I want to see 25A fulfilled. So go back and do the numbers. What will we need to do so that it can happen in my lifetime? So they came back and said, gee, if you can increase it by about 50%, from 1% growth to 1.6% growth, then by their calculations, they were saying, we will have every child in school, including that, by 2050. I said, look at me, I'm not going to make it to 2050. You have to do better. I really am not going to be there 2050, go back. So they went back, and they did the calculation again, and they said, you increase it by 4 times, which is also not very difficult to do. It's difficult to do, but it's not impossible to do. And it may actually be happening on its own momentum. But you increase it by 4, and then maybe by 2030, you meet that provision. Right? So even if our numbers are wrong, what I want to share with you is the questions that our young people were saying, of thinking, okay, by when? You know, it's like, I'm sorry I'm taking your time, but if you have children, if you've ever gone on a long drive, and the children at the back keep asking you, are we there yet? That's the question, right? The young people of Pakistan are asking, are we there yet? And we don't have a good answer for them. The second of the E's, as you remember, was Rozgar, was employment, Bamaksad Rozgar, right? So again, based on assumptions, we looked at very many numbers, complex graph. I won't go into the details. The bottom line is, between now and the next quarter century, you will need between 1.2 and 1.5 million new jobs every year. Right? So these are not existing jobs, new jobs. You remove the people who are retiring, you put in the new people who are coming, you make assumptions about women in the workplace, you make assumption about the labor participation rate, and you come to this window, 1.2 million to 1.5 million new jobs. The challenge, we believe, is not new jobs. 1.5 million jobs is actually not going to be difficult. I'm quite confident that a country of this size, and at the rates we've been doing it, we should be able to do it. What I'm not confident of, unless we make some very real policy changes, is that these would be quality jobs. These would be what we call jobs with dignity. Right? And that, I think, is the great opportunity. And in there, I won't go into it, there's a lot of nuanced work that, again, our young people helped us in thinking about how do you get to quality workplace. For example, the quality of the workplace is a very major factor. A simple thing like toilets in the workplace. Show me a place, for example, that employs large number of women, and I will show you 2 things. I will show you probably, in all probability, a pick and drop service of some type to solve the mobility crisis. And I will show you a decent bathroom. Take those 2 things out, and the quality of the worker as well as the workplace goes down and the employment changes. So very practical things like that. That was the big, one of the big findings in employment. Again, one of my other sort of nice cards from this, again to alert, I thought I was a pseudo expert. I never knew this. Young people alerted us, this was in Faisalabad, alerted us to the fact that there's a law that does not allow women to work on the night shift. Supposedly it is for their benefit. And the response given to us was, if it's for our benefit, why don't you change the conditions rather than keep us from working? And a very valid point was made that especially if you are a working mother working in a factory, that night slot may actually be the most convenient one because it leaves the day to do other things. And yet the law doesn't allow it. So here is a simple thing that can be changed. The employers want it, the workers want it. The other link to employment, and again, there's a very large chapter on this. There are many, many facts and many, many ideas there. But the other one was the link to education, both the quality of education and the substance of education. Whether it is talking about vocational training, getting skills, or just the quality of basic education, being able to read and write. Here is one of the surprises that I don't think will be a surprise. Employer after employer, when we spoke to them, said, my problem is not that I don't have jobs. I have jobs that I cannot fill. That it is the question of the skill that the worker. So the employer is saying, I can't get people to do the work I need to do. The young person, man or woman, is saying, I have a degree that says I can do this work, but I can't find work because, frankly, she or he is not being given those skills by education. So that challenge, I think, really has to be confronted. It's a very major policy challenge. It's a very major policy challenge. If you do not confront it, you get into a downward spiral of poor quality, and it is not easy to come out of it. If you do solve it, that is the way to unleash the entrepreneurial power. Because without that, the entrepreneurial power simply cannot be unleashed. The third of the E's is what we call engagement. And engagement, there's a lot of things, and I struggled what to put up. I wanted to end on a hopeful note. So I've put these two sort of diagrams that are more about the hopefulness of the young people. And the first one of these is, what do you believe? Do you believe Pakistan is progressing or becoming worse in the following area? And you will see that the majority in all of those areas, from religious tolerance to economy to society to politics and so on and so forth, believe that Pakistan is on the path towards the better. Now again, if you really want to dig into the numbers, you might say the majority believe that, but a fairly significant minority, nearly 40% in most of those, is not fully convinced. That should be a more troubling number, right? And that is the power and passion that you need to capture. And the other is the number that I had mentioned earlier. This is a deeper chart about the same thing. How do young people compare their quality of life to that of their parents? And again, as I had said, the thing here is about their aspiration, but it is also about their demand. In some ways, what we are finding in engagement is, here is a young cohort, now the majority of the country, desperately wanting to be heard. I hope I'm not making a political statement. I'm making a statement about our political period, but not about politics with a big P. Many people get very worried at the anger that young people demonstrate, whether it is over Twitter, whether it is in conversation, whether it is at a jalsa throwing this or that. In some ways, I think we need to read that anger much more carefully. When young people feel, like any people, that they are not being heard, they shout. They shout because they think that's the only way they will be heard. And if they aren't heard even when they shout, they scream. And if 64% of your population starts screaming, that is a lot of noise. On that happy note, let me thank all of you for being here. Thank you very much.